I thought it would be just good to give you a quick overview of what's going on in the council in terms of asset disposal, and just give you a feel of how things are identified as surplus and the processes that go through there. And I'll just give us that background information and have some grounds for some debate. I'll just start off with the disposal strategy. We actually have a disposal strategy, which is really, and it was meant to go to the Policy Development Board last night. It's been to a subgroup of the Resources Policy Development Board. It was meant to go on Monday. That meeting was postponed until next Monday. But realistically, what that does is just talk about how we actually go about selling assets, the different ways we sell them, by treaty, through agents, through auction, that sort of the process that we go through. One of the things that we are also looking at doing at the moment is being very clear and very straightforward with our procurement processes. We're actually looking at going out to the market at large and getting a select list of agents to use, rather than just picking them arbitrarily on each and every case. We're going to go through a procurement process saying, we've got, which we'll come to later on in the presentation, we've got an amount of assets that we're going to be looking at disposing of. We want to know who will be the best people to do that for us, rather than having to go out each and every time. Get a proper procurement process in place. But that really is just talking about the methodologies of disposal once we've actually got those surplus assets. But I think the key question perhaps you were asking and raising here is, how do we identify surplus assets? And I think there's several ways of doing that, and I think it'd be just worth just quickly touching upon them and using some real life illustrations of Cheshire West just to try and give it some life. And I'll start with schools. Schools are identified as surplus through a rigorous statutory process which involves extensive public consultation. Lots of people in this room will know about TLC and what went on there across the whole of the area. So that identifies schools that are perhaps got surplus places, have not got enough, are not suitable really for ongoing provision of the service, and also identifies and consults with the citizens that affects, the children and the parents in that local area, members, key people, of alternative provision. So that's a process that identifies where things may become surplus. We then have a process called Asset Challenge, which actually looks, this is an internal process with key officers across all of the services, that examines the properties in terms of, actually, have they got real maintenance problems? They're not fit for doing anything. It's going to cost us a lot of money to invest. Or are they actually very efficient? They just need different services in there. So we look at those things. If we haven't got alternative services, what other things could they be used for? And it's not just about us looking at partners, working with PCT, working with the police authority, working with the fire authority, working with the education sector, looking at what other things we do. And then, do we need to keep those buildings for some future economic development activity? And if none of those things are the case, look at, they are surplus and we were trying to dispose of them. Along that process, and if I just use a real example, the riding school Sorgle, for some of you will know where that is. In Sorgle, TLC identified 2 schools, we're closing them, and a new school was built in Sorgle. It opened in November. One school was demolished, and a little bit has gone to the church. The other school has been identified as surplus, the riding school. And we are looking at how we can maximise value out of that. But we did consider approaches from the community, because the community said, we want this as a community asset. But no sustainable view has come forward, no sustainable proposition has come forward, and our policy that you've adopted is that we would review each and every one of those on their merits. So the riding school has now been identified as surplus, and we're looking at how we can maximise value. We'll come back to that in a minute. Can we get some change of use planning permission before we put it into the market, rather than just selling it to the developing world without that, so we can maximise our value rather than developer profits just maximising their value. So schools is a very clear process. It's our cost. And the third aspect, the third example I'm going to use, is where we're actually looking at making new investments in assets. And the example I'm going to use here is in next year's capital programme is a community resource centre which is going to be built in Kingsway in Chester on the site, for those of you know, the old Woodford School site. So I don't instead of calling it the old school site, we'll call it Kingsway because I think it needs a new identity. And there we're going to be providing adult services. Some of it's going to be respite care, some of it's going to be residential, some of it's actually going to be day centre stuff. And we're going to be replacing 3 existing assets, one of which is Lightfoot Lodge. When the process that's gone through there is evaluated how those buildings work now, how effective they'll be working in the new environments. That's the investment decision has then been made to put the money in there. But part of that is we need to maximise the value from the old assets when we transfer them across. Sell them, in other words, to get back to so we are looking to reduce our assets. Office accommodation, sorry, the final bit. Office accommodation. Again, we're looking at all of our office accommodation. We as Cheshire, West and Chester have got a lot of offices that need to be rationalised. It's been said right from the start of the local government reorganisation process, we needed to do that. With office accommodation, we're actually identifying the offices that we should be moving out from through this asset challenge process. They're testing how expensive they are to run, the maintenance costs, the running costs, what things need to be invested in to bring it up to standard. And then looking at ones that are perhaps more effective but have got some spare capacity in them and moving people in there. What has happened to buildings that's already happened with is Coronation Road in Winsford, forget that, Coronation Road in Ellesmere Port. There was an office block there, and we'd actually relocated the people out of there into Civic Way. So now we've got Civic Way, which has had a little bit of money spent on it. It's a much nicer environment. Everybody's moved into there and feels it is a better place to work. And it's integrated Cheshire West services. You've got safeguarding in there, as well as housing, as well as economic development. So it feels like one of our buildings now, rather than just being Ellesmere Port's previous headquarters. And another example of that is in Watling Street in Northwich, a former administrative building in the middle of Northwich. Really run-down building, not very efficient, and we're looking at decanting people out of there over the next few months into Wyvern House in Winsford, which is a much more effective building, much more efficient building, and that will free up that asset for us to dispose of. We need to dispose of them because otherwise we're going to still incur the cost of holding them. So that's how that comes around. And just to finish, I just set that into context. I've mentioned how we do things and how we're going about it. We've got the balancing of the idea, and the political mandate is to maximise the value of our assets. Use them, maximise the use of the ones we have, but also identify surplus ones to generate maximum receipts to fund your future vision. That is one of the ways of actually getting investment into the future.